Hello everybody and welcome to World of Tanks. Update 9.4 has just been released and I've got a question for you this time. It's times 3 XP day over here and it's not the weekend, and there's also a sale on, I believe, a Russian tier 8 somewhere. Was it the Su-25I that got? No. There is a sale on a very expensive tank, 30% discount. I've got a more sort of a philosophical question for you right now. A rhetorical one that probably I'll end up answering, but a question nonetheless. And that question is, which premium tank, should I buy first? Now I have 1,000 gold, which I got from a friend of mine. Thank you, by the way, very much for that. And yes, it was off. There was a code, and the code got sent to me, and I used the code, and there's my gold. Now, thing is, which premium tank should you, I don't want to say a relatively new player to the game, but a player that doesn't have a premium tank, buy? Which is the first premium tank you should buy? So, that was an awfully convoluted way of conveying that information, but okay, let's just keep going. Which is the first premium tank that I recommend? Well, the obvious question that pops out at you is, do you want a tier 6 or do you want a tier 8? This comes down to how much money you have in your pockets, or rather, how deep are your pockets. My pockets are very shallow, and I'm not afraid to admit that. They are very, very shallow. And I've been looking at tier 5s and 6s, so this is the debate we're going to be having right now. Which nation has the best tier 5 and 6 tanks for you to buy? I will not be including special offer tanks and tanks you can find at the gift shop, or some exclusive deals you can get. I'm looking at the standard tanks that you can buy at all times. So, let's take a look from, so this is going to be a perspective, from the perspective rather, of a player that is not particularly too good at the game. What do I mean by that? Not particularly great at World of Tanks. We're talking about an average, maybe slightly below average player of World of Tanks. Which tank should be their first premium? If they do decide to buy one, and I know a lot of people, and I do mean a lot of people, that just sit in front of the screen and go, so I've got all this money, which tank should I buy? There's a premium. I want a premium tank. I don't want an account. It's boring. I want a tank. I want something exciting. And there's this certain feel of almost, I don't know how to call it, but there's this feeling of importance, maybe, when you get in a tier 6 or higher premium tank, or tier 5 or higher premium tank. There is something about the feeling, I suppose, in the eyes of many new players. So let's go with back into the factory. Let's go with the Chinese first and what they have to offer. Now, these are obviously very expensive, and I highly doubt you're going to be buying any of these with your gold. At a beginning level, I highly doubt you're going to spend all this money on the game yet at this point. So, let's see. Type 64 is the only choice between tier 5 and tier 6 that you have of premium tanks, so let's take a look at it. Now, this is a tank I've never owned. This is a tank I've seen very little of. The gun it gets is good rate of fire, 18, 128 penetration, 115 average damage. This gun would have been awesome on a tier 6 if not for the poor penetration of 128. Tier 5s can bounce that pretty easily. This is a gun comparable to that of the T-34, which I have. It is comparable to this, except you get 18 rate of fire rather than 10, which is a lot more damage. That's nearly double the damage. Well, not well, 2/3 of the damage, let's say, because you're not going to be hitting all of those shots, and there's aiming time and etc. But this is comparable to this, except with more fire rate. So you get that on a tier 6, mind you, with premium matchmaking. Obviously, every premium tank has premium matchmaking within the game of World of Tanks. Now, more than 50 were produced in Taiwan, American vehicle, the Hellcat, blah blah blah. Only 64 prototype. Only one Type 64 prototype survives today, so there's only one of these in the world remaining. And you get to drive it in this game. I guess that is kind of what draws a lot of the people in towards buying tanks as well. But let's see, the frontal turret armor is 25. It's really bad. The radio is good. Well, good. It's an average radio, and the engine power being incredibly awesome due to the weight of the tank. If you take a look at it well, we can take a look at it from here. The top speed is 72 kph. This is an incredibly light and fast tank. I guess if you take a look at the Type 34 or the T-34, you can compare the premium to this in the sense of you're going to get this tank only is going to be lighter, better gun, and a lot faster, but it is going to be in tier 6. So that's what you should expect from this tank. Should you buy it? I don't recommend buying this tank. I heavily do not recommend buying this tank as your first premium. Reason being, you need to know the game in and out to be able to utilize these scout type tanks effectively, and this is very much a scout type tank, even though it is a, well, it is a light tank, so it is a scout with premium matchmaking. You need to know a lot about the game in order to effectively play as a scout, and I do not recommend this. If you are an average player or slightly below, I do not recommend this being your first tank. Let's go over to the French, and their tier 5s and 6s are, well, they don't exist. You don't really get a tier 5 or 6 with a French premium. The closest we're probably going to be getting to is this FCM 36 Pack 40. I've seen so many of this in game. It's tier 3, so I'm not going to discuss it. It's tier 3 premium. You can buy it. Now, don't buy a chocolate bar or something a couple of times, twice for the next week, and you can afford this. So I'm not really going to talk about it that much. It's tier 3. Moving over to the Germans, we have 1, 2, 3 tanks to discuss. Let's get into it. The Dicamax, and I'm going to leave this one for last. You'll see the reason. The Panzer IV, I'm going to mispronounce it. Panzerkampfwagen 4S. No, I'm not going to say that out loud. You're not going to get me to say that out loud. Because I've got no fucking clue how to pronounce it. Schulmaturm? Schulmaturm. I hope that's roughly at least a little bit close to what it's supposed to sound like. This tank used to be incredibly good before it got, well, basically before it became a premium. And before it got punched into tier 6, I believe it got pushed into tier 6. Can't exactly remember, but I think it got pushed into tier 6. Let's take a look at the turret. Traverse speed is meh. Frontal armor is 120, which is pretty good, but if you take a look right there, it is pretty flat around the gun mantlet, and the gun mantlet itself is very thick and spaced, I believe. However, the side is flat and weak, and it does have spaced armor on the side here, but it's very thin space armor, and if you go through it, the other side is equally thin, so don't really count on the armor saving you at any point. The gun depression on this tank, what I do remember, is pretty good. The gun itself is 150 damage, 135 150 penetration, sorry, 135 damage. Let's compare this to a tank that you might have seen in the game and is not a premium. So what I see when I look at this tank is basically a very fast version of the VK3001H. I haven't played with these two ever, so I'm not sure about this one and how it compares. About any of these rather in tier 6 and how they compare. It's nothing like the VK3002M, which someone might compare it to. The reason it is like this is I believe it is because the gun. Here's the gun that you get. Yeah, this is basically the gun that you get. It's in tier 5. You can get it on this tank. So this is how I imagine you playing this tank. Imagine this tank with an incredibly good engine. The armor is not going to save you again, and it's just more maneuverable, better gun depression, etc, etc. So I would compare it to this if this were in some imaginary world incredibly maneuverable. I say incredibly maneuverable, incredibly more maneuverable than what it is, because let's be honest, this tank is incredibly slow, and it used to be one of the fastest tier 5 tanks. This thing isn't incredibly maneuverable. Top speed at 48. The engine power is okay, but so it will get you to 48, but it's nothing incredibly good. It's just an average tank. And on my, let's say on my scale of how good the tank is, this one falls below average. Let's take a look at now the T25. Now, I've seen a lot of these being driven around. It's a medium tank, tier 5 with this Skoda gun that comes at 116 pen, 110 damage, 14 rate of fire. The good rate of fire on this gun really is the only thing that's keeping it alive, I suppose, keeping the tank as an option. It is only 1,500 gold, which is something you might want to consider when buying a tank. The aiming time is 2.5 seconds. Dispersion is 0.41. It's a good gun. Well, don't get me wrong, it's a good gun. I would have preferred slightly more penetration on it, considering it is tier 5. Premium matchmaking, yes, but again, tier 5s. Let's take a look at some of your competition. I mean, you know what comes at a tier 5 competition. A lot of these things can, especially the Soviets, can bounce a lot of what you're going to throw at them. So again, the rate of fire keeps it. The rate of fire basically compensates for the lack of penetration, which there isn't really a big lack of penetration. The turret is 60mm and a very maneuverable tank indeed, with top speed of 60. I would compare this to the Chinese that we looked at. Basically less in each category, but at tier 5. So you take the Chinese, which is a light scout, and you put it in the medium class. You give it a bit better gun, considering it's tier 5. Yes, it is better. It scales well in that sense, and you get rid of a slight bit of the speed, and you give it slightly better armor, which, let's be honest, it's not going to be able to bounce. I mean, 50 hull, 60 turret, it's not going to bounce anything. Tier 5 is pretty powerful. It might bounce a couple of tier 4s and tier 3s, but tier 5s, no. It's not going to bounce any tier 5s. People like this tank. Usually, people that buy this tank are very pleased with it because it's fun, let's be honest. It's quick, you get to move around a lot, you get to shoot very often with it. I believe that's what's most appealing about this tank, so it is definitively an option that I would consider seriously. Out of all of these that we've looked at, this is right now probably the best one to consider buying, as it is a versatile tank and a fun tank, which, let's be honest, is most important. The Dicamax next. Okay, the Dicamax. This is a tank that I am 80% sure that I'm going to be getting as a premium. This is 3,200 gold, which is a lot. Let's be honest. It's gonna, you're gonna sink your hand really deep into your pocket to pull out that money. It is expensive, but it is probably the best tier 6 medium. One of the best tier 6 mediums that you can buy. Let's take a look at it. Do you see now why it's the best? Gun dispersion 0.36, aiming time 2.3. That is great. Rate of fire 6.45, not that great. 170 penetration, 300 alpha damage. That is insane. Fat Max, as it is called. Initially intended to destroy bunkers, this is a bunker buster tank with 300 alpha damage. Ladies and gentlemen, you now see why this is such a good tank. I don't know of any Dicamax driver that went into this tank and went like, I don't like it. You might not have all spectacular games in it, but this thing is an incredible moneymaker, which is something I haven't mentioned. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video. A lot of people have tuned off by now. Money making is probably one of the most important reasons for you to get a tier 6 premium, or even a tier 5 premium. Premium tanks are extremely good at making money. Experience somewhat, sorry, I hit my microphone there for accidentally. Experience is, is an okay. Well, it's a pretty big reason, but the main one will be money making, and this is an insanely good money maker. You get that radio, and as far as top speed goes, it goes up to 40. It's not too spectacular, but it's not too bad. You can still relocate, and the traverse speed is pretty good as well. The armor, obviously, it doesn't have any. If we take a look at the details, 50 whole armor, 20 on the side. You're not going to bounce anything. Although the angling there is ridiculous. I guess you might be able to bounce a stock D34, maybe? Not firing high explosive? I guess that's a possibility. Actually, no, 50's too low. I don't think you would bounce it. Maybe. I don't know. It depends on the angle of attack, but it's going to take a miracle to bounce anything, let's be honest. The way you play this tank, let's compare it again to something that we've seen in the regular game, where, without having to pay money to see it and play with it, is probably the SU-100. The guns are kind of similar. You would think that, oh, this has 390. Why get the premium tank and not this? Well, 1, money making, 2, experience, 3, premium matchmaking. So those are the reasons why you should buy a premium rather than an. Well, those are the benefits, let's say, of a premium tank. That, and you don't have to grind anything. It's elite immediately as soon as you buy it. So I compare it to this, except it is smaller, which is something very important to note. The Fatmax or the Dicamax is smaller. So there you go. Moving on from the Germans to the British. The TIS-5 Excelsior, not going to talk a lot about this one. There's probably the least amount I'm going to talk about this. This thing will not make you money, it will lose you money in the sense of you will need to buy premium ammunition to make this tank any good. With a 91 penetration on tier 5, you're not going to do anything. The speed is bad, it has a lot of HP, which is probably the only redeeming factor. The armor is bad if you're facing off against anyone that knows how to shoot you. If he doesn't know how to shoot you, then, great, but you could be driving a Churchill and you're going to get pretty much the exact same result. This goes pretty low on my list of tanks to buy. This, you need to be an incredibly high skill level player to make this work. Do not buy this tank. It is not good, basically. The Matilda BP, the next tier 5. It is somewhat comparable to the Matilda, but not too much. Not too much. If we take a look at the armor, is 76 here. And the hull is not that impressive, it's 75. It is a medium tank, but it moves like a heavy. You see the top speed is 22, so it's a slow tank with not that great of a gun. You do get 26 rate of fire, which is basically a machine gun, but not that impressive. And the thing is, you really don't get to see these a lot until the Black Prince. We don't see them a lot around, and that should pretty much tell you why. Now, the arguably most fun tank in the game, the TOG 2. Hooray, the TOG. If you haven't gotten this tank with the Togtoberfest event, then I feel sorry for you. But if it makes you feel better, I didn't get it either on Togtober, so I was very busy that week, couldn't really play. So, what's the main point about? Well, let's just take a look at these two stats, and you're going to know everything you need to know about the TOG. Just read this out loud, and you're going to see 1,400 hit points. The pretty much one of 2 redeeming factors for the TOG. The downsides being 14 kp kilometers an hour, slow as fuck. Imagine a sausage rolling around the battlefield. Yeah, this is basically it. It's developed for trench warfare, not World War II. It's a World War I tank, let's be honest. Well, not really, but it's based off a World War I tank, so, The gun is incredible. All round, incredible gun. If you can get these in a platoon, then you are dealing with probably the best tanks in the game in a platoon. Because you then have 3 tanks with 1,400 health. Wherever you go, you're gonna win. Because you're not gonna die. at all, basically. It's gonna take you a while. It's gonna take you a while to get there, but you know, when you get there, you're gonna win. If you get these tanks in a platoon, that's pretty much it. A lot of people hate the TOG because they don't know how to play it. The TOG is one of the best tanks in the game, and what is most important, it is the most fun tank in the game. Well, one of, like, let's say the top 5 most fun tanks to play. And if you're looking for raw fun, I'd go with the TOG, but take it with a pinch of salt because you might hate it. If you're willing to take the risk, I applaud you. Buy the TOG right now, but you might hate it. I do have a friend who bought the TOG. He was all over that TOG hype, and he was seriously disappointed by his TOG, and he ended up selling it, which is very disappointing, let's say the least, to me as a TOG enthusiast. It's risky. Let's just put it out there. It's risky. TOG is incredibly fun for me, but there is a chance you might not like it. So that's all I'm gonna say. And is that everything? Yes, this is tier 8. So this is tier 7 actually. So we're not gonna really talk about that one right now, as it is a bit more pricey. Next would be the Americans. 2 choices: the Ram 2 and the T14. Let's pull them up like this. Ram 2 is slightly more expensive, although I don't think we should really note that too much. This, I guess we should compare the tanks and then decide which one is better, but both are okay. The main features of this tank would be the good hull armor, which is extremely well angled. Sorry, not the hull armor, the good turret armor, which is very well angled and spaced there, and here would be the hull armor and the turret armor, which is well angled, and well, the turret armor is slightly more flat. These things are hard to penetrate, especially due to the angling. These things can be ridiculously hard to penetrate if angled properly and side-scraped, which does require a pretty high skill level, but if you can pull it off and if you can learn how to do that effectively, these tanks are a nightmare to penetrate at certain times. And in certain situations, the Ram 2 is basically a slightly faster variant of the T14, gameplay mechanics wise. Although there are some key differences in that you can see that this one has a lot less horsepower, but it is also a lot lighter. The guns they get is probably the most, second most interesting thing that you're going to want to know. 26 rate of fire. This is basically a machine gun, let's be honest. 105 pen, 75 damage. 105 pen at tier 5 is okay with that rate of fire. 75 damage is kind of low. If this was 100, then this would be one of the best tanks in the game, probably at tier 5. That would be ridiculous damage. With 100 base damage, that would be pretty ridiculous. But you end up with a low alpha damage gun with high rate of fire on the Ram 2, and the T14, kind of similar situation, but a bit different. Slightly less rate of fire, but more damage and less penetration, which is probably going to be one of the most annoying things about the tank. Is just 92 millimeters of penetration. At tier 5 is not horrible, but you know, if you're gonna shoot at tier 6s, you're gonna tier 4, sorry, you're gonna penetrate all of them more or less. Tier 5s, you're gonna start to choke a little bit in regards to penetrating them. And it's not the fastest tank, so outflanking them is not. It can be done, obviously. It's not a slow tank, but it's not the best tank for outflanking the enemy as well, so these two are definitely fun tanks to drive around, but I think they're average tanks. They are probably the most average tanks of all the tanks we've looked at. These would be the most average tanks that you get. Basically, you get good armor if you angle it well, with extremely high rate of fire on both of them, and slightly low penetration. Whew, I need a minute to rest here. We'll do the Soviets in a second. I just basically thought of something. People are probably going to complain about lack of gameplay footage in this video. Yeah, if you want a replay of a specific tank, you go look up that replay on Google. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy every tier 5 and 6 premium tank and then show you how to play with it. I really do not have that money. So, sorry, but you're not going to be getting any premium tank gameplay here. I'm just discussing what tank to buy. And if you're particularly interested in basically from... if you're particularly interested in one of them, then look up videos of it online. Moving on with the Soviets, the Su-100Y, the elite tank destroyer at Tier 6, gets this gun. Box tank. Box tank. Box tank! Box tank! Box! It's a tank! That's in the shape of a box. Look at it. Box tank. Yes. Thank you, Quickie Baby, for giving us infinite amusement with saying with regards to saying box tank every time we see this tank. It is really a box, isn't it? Look at it. Like, the armor on this thing is dreadful. Yeah, 60. Where is it? 60? Is it here? No, it's not really 60 there. Where do you intend to bounce anything? You're not going to bounce anything. It's a tank that's a box that has 440 average damage with 3.75 rate of fire. That's all you need to know. Guess you want to know the top speed. 35, kind of below average, but it's a box with 450 damage. That's what it is. It is a very fun tank to drive around. And the chances are you're not going to hate it. As I mentioned the TOG, there is risks of you hating it slightly. It's fun. It looks silly. It's funny and fun. And I don't think you're going to hate it simply because dealing 440 damage to a tank that's charging your way is pretty hilarious every time it happens. So there we go. This is a fairly awesome tank. Definitely above average and one of the main contenders for your first premium tank. That is as far as Tier 6s go in the Soviet line. The Tier 5s, there's 3 of them. I really cannot bother going through each and every one of them. This is basically a Churchill from the British line. It does have certain benefits to it. And it does have, the gun is good. Well, not really good. Let's take a look at the gun. The gun is okay-ish with that rate of fire, but it's similar to the American Tier 5 medium tanks with basically high rate of fire, average penetration, and below average alpha damage. And it is very slow. I've went down. If you take a look at the British tank tree line thing, I've went to the Churchill one, and it just got too laborious to play. It just got too boring. They're slow. Their armor is crap. What do you mean, Juggernaut? Their armor is crap? Noob at World of Tanks. Yeah, their armor's great on paper. Look, 177. Woohoo! Hype. If you were Alt-Tab, you just didn't see what I do. What I did. The armor's crap. If you have a pair of brain cells that are connected to each other, you're going to realise where you need to shoot these things to penetrate them, and you're going to penetrate them with most of your shots. So, yes, their armor is crap. You find someone that doesn't know how to... You find someone that doesn't know how to shoot them, you're going to have a whale of a time. But, for those who do know how to shoot them, you're not going to have too much fun, trust me. That's as far as the Churchill goes. The Matilda 4. Crap version of Matilda used for money making and XP. Next. It really is, though. It really is not that good of a tank, and it only is used for money making and XP. Let's be honest. Matilda on the British line, you get a Tier 4, and is, well, not probably, it is the best Tier 4 tank. So, there you go. The Su-85I, one of the latest premium tanks that has been added to the game. The gun you get is this one. 160 alpha damage is pretty healthy for a Tier 5. 13 rate of fire is pretty good considering the pen and the damage. Dispersion of 43, aiming time is pretty good. We are now, when I look at this tank for me personally, when I look at it, What is very important for me is the gun traverse speed and the track traverse speed, and those are pretty damn good. So this is a maneuverable tank, definitely. The top speed is 50 kph, which is very, very good as well. 60mm of armor, not that great. Most things are going to penetrate you. If you're going to compare it to something, then we can compare it to the Su-85. Basically, it is a smaller, more chopped off excess bits, I suppose you can say. A smaller version of the Su-85 with smaller and lighter. Hence it is faster. The gun you get is this kind of quality, basically. This is something similar to this. Very similar to that, in fact. So there you go. Tier 5. And fun tank. Definitely with the speed, you can do some pretty funny things with it. Just bear in mind you have very low armor on it. So if something like that appeals to you, then you can go ahead and buy it. For me personally, I think the 2,300 gold you're going to spend on it is not particularly worth it, considering that you can pay slightly extra and get this, or the Dicamax, which is pretty much, the top 3. They are in the top 3 spots for which tank to buy. The Japanese have the Chinukai. If you were on the test server, you had the chance to play with this pretty much all day long. Let's take a look at the gun. Not that great, but the rate of fire is kind of average, above average, so the dispersion is pretty good, and the aiming time is okay. The turret armor is pretty bad for a tier 5. Hull armor is definitely very bad. The thing is, it's Japanese, so the gun depression is gonna suck, and it is a big tank. People don't realize this when they look at it from this perspective. It is a very big tank. So bear that in mind that this is definitely not going to be easy to hide it around corners and buildings and urban maps. It is only 1,500 gold, which is something to note, but it's not that fun. Thing is, there's nothing distinctively specially good about it, which is why it falls below. Well, it doesn't really fall in the list of tanks that I would recommend full-heartedly for you to buy. Which tanks do I recommend that you buy full-heartedly? Try that again. Full-heartedly recommend that you buy. Obviously, the Su-100Y. The TOG. The Dicamax. And that's it, basically. Type 64 is a very fun tank. It can be an extremely fun tank. From a perspective of an average to below average player, I don't recommend you buy this. But if you are a higher skill level than that, if you believe you are, then go for it. And if you have experience playing with lights, I think you're gonna like that tank. But if you do not want a scout tank to be your premium, which to be honest I really don't want, then these tanks are the tanks for you. Let's actually just put them like this, and let's screenshot that. If I can remember my screenshot key. Okay, so these would be the 3 premium tanks I recommend you get full-heartedly. The TOG, I already said, it's kind of risky. You might not like it, as I do hear a lot of people that have gotten it on Togtoberfest. Basically, they're constantly complaining about the TOG. I love it, but you might not. So dig more in, more into the TOG if you're interested in buying such a tank. As for these 2 tank destroyers, I guarantee you'll get your money's worth out of them. Alright, I personally guarantee you get your money's worth out of them. They are extremely fun and good tanks, excellent money makers. Just the first thing that jumps out at you is they are superb money makers, if you obviously know how to use them, which inevitably you'll learn to as you play more and more games with them. Don't expect your first 100 games to be, great in these premium tanks. but when you do learn how to use them, the money you will get is just going to be raining cash all over you at tier 6. And generally, tier 6s and tier 5s are the best money makers. That and the tier 8 premiums. Those are your best money makers in the game. Period. Not one of the best. Those are the best money makers in the game. So there we go. What if you want a lower end tank, though? Is something that probably we should consider. Because these, let's be honest, they're 3,000 something. They're pretty expensive. If you want a lower end, I recommend the T25. If you don't, basically, if you don't want to spend over 2,000 gold for your first premium tank, I recommend the T25 and either the T14 or the Ram 2. I've mentioned these. Basically, dubstep. No, the distinction between these two is your personal preference. What do you prefer? Take a look at their stats for a bit longer and decide what would you prefer on a tank, because they are kind of similar, and the only reason why you should go for one or the other is what you personally feel would suit your playstyle more. So there you go. Those are the three that I would recommend. The Churchill and the Matilda, no, and this one obviously. This one's 2,300, which is again slightly over 2,000. But if you want to buy it, then go for it. I think it's probably, as a tank destroyer, again, tank destroyers tend to be a bit more expensive, but the money making is there. The alpha damage is not that good though, which is understandable why, considering you get, you know, that thing at tier 6. But if you really don't want to spend your money on the three that I've mentioned, the golden three, I'm going to call them, of tier 6. Then, you know, I guess this one's the next best option. This and the medians that I've mentioned before. Chidukai is a below average tank in my eyes, so there we go. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope I haven't bored you to death too much, and I hope I've helped you decide which tank to buy first as your premium. Apologies for the lack of gameplay in this video, but I just wanted to discuss what tank you need to buy. If you haven't seen Fury, go look and go watch it. It's a good movie, and there we go. Whew, that was exhausting. So this is probably like the third time I'm going to say this, and I apologise for doing so. Thank you for watching, and please remember to leave a like rating down below, and subscribe if you like the video and the channel itself, and stick around for more. Until next time, take care, goodbye.